This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. Welcome into episode number 72 of the Healthy Scratch interview segment. I'm Noah Grant, joined alongside my co-host Nic Maxon, and we have another Nick joining the show today. And referring back to you, the original Nick, the OG, if you will,
Mr. or something, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Maxon. What were your impressions of this interview? I know he's up in the higher ranks of the hockey world, but from my point of view, very intellectual.
You can tell he hasn't been interviewed a lot. And it's actually a compliment, right? Because, I think as athletes, when you deal with the media, you kind of get into a kind of a habit of just kind of some cliche answers and whatnot. But no, again, former Husky, very successful career again with St. Cloud State, is edging quite the successful career at the National Hockey League level. Very, like you mentioned, just very thoughtful, very articulate, a very, very great interview, and a lot of good backstories too, to not only how he got to the NHL, but also sometimes again down in the minors, some of the players and coaches he dealt with. So it's a really, really good interview. I think a lot of folks are going to enjoy this one.
Yeah, I definitely agree as well. I always think it's cool to, I mean, you see Nic Dowd and these guys on TV, and to hear about, his story about Alex Ovechkin and things like that. It's sometimes surreal, I think in some ways. And we won't keep you waiting for this one. As always, episode number 72 with Nic Dowd on the Healthy Scratch interview segment.
To the Den, Husky and Warming House podcast fans. It is episode number 72, and joined us for a special interview is former St. Cloud State University forward Nic Dowd. Nic, thank you again for joining us and coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me, Nick. No, I really appreciate it, and always excited to reconnect with anybody via St. Cloud. So this is exciting.
Nic, I do want to point out, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but you are a little late to the show as far as the time is concerned. Would you like to inform the listeners as to what you were up to?
Yeah, well, obviously new father 18 or 19 months ago. So I want to blame it on my kid, Louie. And it's great because at this age, they can't argue back. So Lou's going to take all the blame, which is perfectly fine because he does consistently make me late for everything. And on top of it, I think I was probably just trimming up this mustache that I just shaved yesterday. And that probably took a little bit of time too.
That looks pretty solid. Nic, I also got to ask too, why the name Louie? Any reason in particular? How'd you come up with that one?
Yeah, nothing in particular. My wife liked it a while ago. Well, a while ago meaning is a while ago before Lou was born. And I wasn't super on board with it. And then I kind of came around, and yeah, I like it now. He's got a Louis Henry Allen. So he's got his kind of little tribute to his both grandparents, both granddads took their first names as middle names. So yeah, so that's how we came up with it. Nothing crazy.
Nic, as far as, life events are concerned, I'm sure there's so many great hockey memories that you have. We'll get into those here in just a little bit, but, talk about what it's like, you said being a new father, again, your son, just a little bit over a year old. What was that process like? And I guess what's been the reward of being a dad?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I think at the time we had Lou about 4 to 5 weeks, maybe 5 weeks early, which was a little challenging. I think we were in a rental house in Arlington, which is most NHL guys are, unless you're fortunate enough to own a house in your city. But we were in our rental house, and I think we expected to have that, when someone gives you a due date of a baby, you expect it to come on that due date when it's your first kid. You don't think like, oh, this will come early, right? That's not a thing. So when Lou came 5 weeks early, I was in the hot tub. We were about to play the Islanders. I'm sitting next to John Carlson, and me and Carly are kind of rubbing our eyes. It's a 12:30 game on a Sunday. It's New Year's Eve. And, we're excited to play this 12:30 game because, personally, I love afternoon games because then you get done, you got the whole day to have a nice dinner, get some sleep. And then, you might even be lucky enough like we were to have the next day off. And that night was New Year's Eve. So the fellas, we'd already set up a nice dinner. We're going to have some nice drinks and it was going to be a good night. And my wife was going to be a sober cab, so that was even better. So we're sitting in the hot tub, and I do distinctly remember like kind of sitting there and be like, "Oof, man, like we got to get ready for this game. This is going to be Islanders going to be a tough team, especially on a Sunday afternoon." And then all of a sudden, I get out of the hot tub, and our hockey ops guy comes in, and he's like, "Hey, Nick, I think your wife's going into labor." And I was kind of like right away, I was like, bullshit, and so he's sitting there like, no, seriously, he doesn't have any kids. So I kind of we looked at each other. I don't have any kids. And I'm like, well, should I play the game? And he's like, I don't know, man. So then I talked to my wife on the phone. She's kind of in tears a little bit. And she's like, yeah, like they told me like my water broke, we're having a baby today. And I remember in that moment, I was like, holy shit, man. Like I'm going to be a dad today, not on, January 29th when they told me I was supposed to be a dad, and I could have had the whole crib, like nothing was built. Not that you need a crib at that age, but the room wasn't ready. Like it was just kind of like, we were going to expect those last 5 weeks to get this stuff prepped. And, and then my coach comes in and he obviously had kids, older guy. And he was like, yeah, I was like, hey, should I play? I don't know. Like it's 12:30 game here. I don't know how long does this stuff take? And he's like, no, you got to go. So I got dressed right away. All the guys are kind of like, Dowd, what are you doing, man? And I was like, oh, my kids, my wife went into labor. And I'll never forget, I sat there and I was putting on my tie, and my buddy Hathaway was like, man, just get out of here. What are you doing putting your tie on? So I was like, all right. So I got scrammed out of there, went all the way home, went to the hospital in my suit because I was just like so like out of it. And my wife's like sitting there, everything's cool. The process is a longer process. And she was like, you need to go home and change out of your suit. So I went home, changed out of my suit, came back. And 18 months later, back to your question, is that, it's been unbelievable. I think it's funny because you're always pushing to get to the next stage with a kid, that you have the kid and you're like, man, this is the toughest thing you've ever done. And then you get to the next stage and you're like, all right, the last stage was so easy compared to this stage. And, Lou is gone from, he just ate and slept and pooped all day, which we thought was really hard because you're not getting any sleep. He's like a little terrorist. And then he goes into like a kamikaze pilot, where it's like everything in the room is ready to explode, and he's moving everywhere. He's slashing everybody. He scored. We have mini nets that my brother got me, and every time we score a goal, we have to jump on Dad's shoulders and run around the room singing "We Are the Champions." And it's like, I'm like, man, I was like, sometimes he doesn't even score a goal and he wants to do that. I'm like, buddy, you got to score a goal first before we can celebrate. That's just how it goes. So, but yeah, it's been super rewarding. And it's something that, you can't explain it. You can't understand it until you do it, I guess. But it's been good.
Yeah, I like how you talk about that's such a true hockey player thing to talk about, like the development of your child is like you're developing like a pro. Like, yeah, if we're going to get him to this camp, we get him to do this, it's going to be great. So two guys that you mentioned, I kind of being on your line there, Hathaway, and then it's Carl Hagelin is the other one that's been on your unit kind of for the Caps as you're entering the last year, I believe, of your contract. What's it been like playing with that guys? And another guy that got re-signed, and Alex Ovechkin. I mean, the first time you walked in the room and saw Ovi in there, was it kind of a surreal experience, or were you, accustomed to being with the big dogs after being, with Drew Doughty and the Kings and things like that?
Sure. Yeah. Back to the first question, I think it's been awesome playing with Hath and Hags. I think we've become pretty close. And we were the only guys to be fortunate enough to stay together all year last year, which you get to create a lot of chemistry with each other, and, you get that freedom and you're not worried about getting split up. And it was really good. I think, playing under Lavi was really beneficial for all three of us, and we found good roles. But Yeah, it's good. Hath is one of my really, really good buddies on the team. We spend quite a bit of time together, and Hags is right up there too. We don't spend as much time together, but when we're at the rink, obviously we're on the same line. So he's been a good guy to learn from, and he's been through it all. He's been a top line guy, and he's been a bottom six guy, and so it's been good. But yeah, to Ovi's to talk about Ovi is, yeah, I mean, I think like I have played with some really big time players, and when I was a rookie walking in with Kopi and Anze Kopitar and Drew Dowdy and Dustin Brown, especially like Brownie and Kopi, guys like that, like that was a little bit not overwhelming, but you're kind of like, oh man, this is like big time, like this is it, right? And playing with Luch, like I love Luch. I remember my first moment where I ever felt like I'd actually like really made it, and I was after the warm-ups of like after my second game warm-ups. We were playing Edmonton at home, and I was just called up, and we just played the Wild on the road. And I was walking down the tunnel after warm-ups, walking down the tunnel. As fans don't know this, but you get off, you drop your gloves off with your equipment guy as you're getting off the rink, and they put them on the rack and start to dry on them. It gets them all nice and crispy, whatever. Everyone likes to do it. But Luch is in front of me, and he's like 10 steps down the hallway. And I kind of had my head down. You're not thinking about much. You're getting ready for the game. And I looked up, and I just saw Lucic on the back of the jersey. And I was just like, holy shit, man, this is awesome. Like, and this is like who I get to share my experience with. And he probably has no clue about that, but it was just, that was my very first moment where I was like, this is it. And, but with the big man, Obi is, I walked into my first day, and I actually sit next to O in the practice rink where we spend like 90% of our time. So when I looked up and it said Ovechkin and then Dowd, I was like, oh, that's pretty special. Like, get to sit next to the big man. I hadn't even met him yet. But yeah, I mean, he's a superstar. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's done so much for the game and for that organization alone. So it'll be good. I'm guessing that this will be the end of his career after this contract. So it'll be great that, he's been able to do what he's done and stayed with the same organization. So
Nick, let's kind of build on that a little bit. There's always the talk about, the transition between different levels of player, right? From juniors or high school up to college, and then college to even minors. But I guess, for you did spend some time down there with the Manchester Monarchs as well as the Ontario Reign. When you did get called up, can you talk about those first couple of NHL games and the experiences? And I guess, what was the biggest difference for you between the game at the AHL level compared to the NHL level?
Well, I mean, I think like from game to game within the game, I think that guys are just like every single player on that team is a good player. You play in the minors and maybe bottom six guys are, guys that have just signed out of juniors. They've just signed out of college. And maybe they're getting their feet wet. And I think if you've been a couple years or even just a year in the American League, you can take advantage of guys like that. Guys are still trying to figure out who they are, what type of player they are. And honestly, I mean, it's easy to push guys around it in those types of situations if you know like that you can take advantage of that. And I think when you get to the NHL, it's like every single line is a great line, and they're all looking to take advantage of a mistake. And when there is a mistake that happens, I mean, if a goal's not scored, an incredibly high quality chance has happened, and maybe your goalie made a great save, but you're probably still going back to the bench, and your head coach is like, all right, well, we can't trust the young kid right now. So I just thought that I was just amazed at how good all 12 forwards were and all 60 were throughout the game. And then it's just, the elite players like the Alex Ovechkins, the Nicky Backstroms, TJ Oshie's, like guys like that. I mean, they have great games almost every game. So I think along with like the whole season, what I've learned is that consistency is probably the hardest thing to do, and being able to replicate what you're good at every single game. So, I mean, individually, some guys are, point guys, right? So they're required to get points every game. They're required to play well, create offense, whatever. Like guy like myself I'm relied on defensively. I take a lot of face-offs. I kill a lot of penalties. So you have to be good at that stuff every single game because it's very easy to lose your spot. But I think I've learned how to do that. And I think a lot of things that pushes kids out that kids don't I didn't understand at an early pro age, NHL especially, is like there's only 6 forwards on a team that are going to play like top 6 minutes, right? So every single player on that team, I mean, there might be a couple guys in their career that maybe were that type of player their whole life. But can you guys still see me here? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But every single player on that team was a top 6 guy their whole life. That's why they're in the NHL. I mean, they were mostly all of us were point guys, all Americans, top 10 scorers in the junior hockey leagues, whatever you want to call it, and so when you get there, you got to figure out like, okay, well, like there's 4 centers on a team. So I'm probably not going to beat out Backy and Kuzi. Lars is a great player as well. So, okay, so where's my spot? Where can I fit? Where can I stick? It's hard to understand that as a young age because you come in and you're so naive to the whole process. And then you get there and it's like, okay, hey man, here's the pecking order. You're not going to beat these guys out unless you're a super elite player and they want you to get into that spot. So you have to find your role and you have to stick with it. And, I think my biggest thing that I've been, most proud of myself of is, just trying to stick with it and trying to keep pushing in the right direction despite having a lot of setbacks at times. Cause it is tough, man. It's tough to push through sometimes because it just feels like you're not going to get anywhere and your chance is never going to come. And, lo and behold, mine came last year and I got to play with 2 great players on a great team and I had a good year. And that's just kind of, you have to push until you get there. And that's why a lot of guys fall off. They just don't understand that. They don't get to that opportunity. And, before you know it, they've been forced out because someone else is willing to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that process. I mean, you think about it. I mean, we're sitting here, not to be cliche or anything, with one of the best 1,000 players in the world, sitting in front of us. And I think that says a lot to a testament. You talked about your success at the collegiate level. You have 7 NCAA, WCHA, or NCHC awards, and we're a Hobey Baker finalist. And you sit 17th all time in St. Cloud State scoring, but that all means nothing when you jump to that next level, right? I do have some things to add about Manchester and Ontario, a couple questions about some players, but I wanted to go back to a point that you had made about, how a simple mistake can mean everything. I'm going to go back to your first NHL game against Minnesota. It was a 2-1 loss, and I think the game winner was actually Mikko Koivu. You took a penalty. And I think that ended up being the game winner in that game. Do you remember your first game at all? You actually drew a penalty as well, too. But do you remember your first game at all? Was it all kind of a blur? I mean, take us through those moments when you finally got that call up and, we're wearing the LA Kings sweater in the NHL for the first time.
Yeah, so there's like a big backstory to that. So I actually got called up on like a Thursday, and I was supposed to play Friday night in LA. And they were playing Boston. And I was told, hey, come down Thursday night. Be prepared to skate Friday morning. And we're still working through some cap issues. But we need you prepared Friday morning to pregame skate, play Friday night at home versus Boston. And then they go on the road. And I believe they played Minnesota. So I don't know. I can't exactly remember the combo, but it was something like that. And I got all my shit packed up. I rented a car because we only had one car, my wife and I couldn't leave her without a car and park mine in like LA at the airport or whatever. And so I got all my stuff. I got my first call up at 4 p.m. Blakey called me and like, obviously you're over the moon, right? You're like, oh my God. And Paige came in from like getting groceries and I told her, and it was just like the best moment, one of the best moments of my life up to that day. Cause everything just came to a head where you finally get to what you're working for. And you can, you're like, man, I'm going to play my first NHL game, which is like at 25 years old, 2 years of juniors, 4 years of college, basically 2 years in the American League. It was a long time. So I get my call up, I get all this shit done. I get my hockey bag. I'm driving down there. They tell me to drive down at like 10 o'clock at night to miss the traffic. And because they had cap stuff they were working through. So like, they didn't want me to leave, whatever. So I'm driving down, I'm like halfway there. I'd already told my parents, this is like a really big deal. They called me and told me I had to turn around and come back. So I wasn't called up. I wasn't called up, and I had never actually been called up. It was just a phone call that they had made, and everything was getting prepared. So I went back. I was super bummed. I had to play 2 games in the American League at home, which was fine. But at the time, you're just like, God, man, I maybe could be playing the NHL right now, right? But I had a great coach in Mike Stuthers. He knew the whole situation. The guy's awesome. We still keep in touch, and all was good, whatever. So then the games are over. I think I get called on like Sunday, And they're like, all right, it's happening. We're actually gonna do this. So I'm like, oh, okay, all right, this is awesome. So, and it was a great situation because it ended up being my first game, ended up being in the X, which was like unreal, very familiar territory. I have a bunch of my wife's family in Minnesota. That's where she's from. That's where we live. And so I get called up, I get on the plane, we're going there, and I check into the St. Paul hotel at like 9:00 at night. And I thought it was like the coolest thing that they had like these unreal room service menus that I wasn't used to seeing in American League hotels. And so I ordered like this bunch of food, ate it that night, thought I was being like a super great pro. Woke up the next morning, the boys were on like a back-to-back, so everyone was just like dead. And they probably played like Winnipeg or someone. They were coming down, and I woke up. I was like the first guy. They didn't have a pregame skate. They just had like a stretch. So I was like the first guy down there, and basically everyone was like so tired. They were like walking by me, assuming that I was just like one of their buddies, but no one really gives a shit after a back-to-back because you're all so tired. And you're like, man, like you're trying to get what you can out of the morning and get yourself ready to play. So I met a couple guys, whatever. And like, of course I'm in there, like trying to do everything that I can do to get ready for this game. But and I remember I walked over with Alec Martinez, and I was asking him questions about warm-ups, and he eventually looks at me and goes, hey, you've done this a bunch before. I think you're going to be okay. So we get into the game, I'm getting dressed. And LA was filled with like a bunch of older, really professional hockey players at that time. So yeah, being in that locker room was pretty intimidating. Guys are super, generous, really nice. I kind of kept to myself at the time and had my first game. I think I played like 14 minutes, which is unreal under Daryl, who was a tough coach to play for. And honestly, I thought I was probably one of my best games. And it was funny because I was coming up from the American League where I played like 20 something minutes a night. And I was on, you're playing power play, penalty kill, you're taking face offs, you're doing everything. And so when I went up there, I had like legs for days because I'd only played 14 minutes and I was used to playing like 22. So I felt great, had a great game, drew a penalty my first shift, ended up I got a plus on Toffoli's goal. My wife was in the stands. It was awesome. And then ended up getting called for a goal interference. And Koivu scored, which like I actually didn't even remember until you told me that. And then we lost 2-1. I think Tanner Pearson, or 3-2. I think Tanner Pearson scored their first goal. I can't even remember, but maybe it was 2-1. But I know Top scored. I was even on the power play that game. I mean, yeah, it was great. So I got to see like 30 people after the game, took some photos, and I think after that we were off to. We actually went to Winnipeg the next day and played, and that was like a whole nother animal. But yeah, I mean, I remember that. I remember it well, and I couldn't have been, happier that it happened in Minnesota. It's pretty special.
Speaking of good memories, Nick, obviously you don't, get to that point without, your collegiate career again with St. Cloud. That's, kind of what we have to talk about a little bit here too. But, 4 years again with the Huskies, pretty good numbers, so over 100 points in your career, again, as I know I mentioned before. But is there any particular memories that stick out to you during your playing career at the Herb Rush National Hockey Center, or maybe at maybe some road games at all?
I hear there was a Frozen Four appearance in there.
Yeah, that was a tough appearance though. I mean, I think the goal versus Notre Dame sticks out in my head a lot my senior year, advancing to basically, we got spanked by the Gophers the next night, but it was like 2 minutes left in the first overtime, and hadn't really had much of a game yet personally, and our team had played really well. And then I just was fortunate enough to be put in a good spot and kind of shot the puck and it went in. And I'll never forget that moment. Curled into the corner, and I remember seeing like everyone experiences it when all hockey players have been through this when you score a goal, and just getting mobbed by your teammates and stuff like that. I mean, that was pretty special. But yeah, I think, I don't know, man, there's so many memories that that go back there. I think, playing the Gophers of North Dakota, at Herb Brooks Center was always super special. Those games were standing room only, and our crowd was so great. yeah, I think probably that Notre Dame is probably one of my most favorite moments as a player there. So.
Yeah, Nick, if I can follow up, my co-host, I should say, if I can follow up on that a little bit, two players I wanted to ask about that, one that was with you all 4 years, and then one that was with you for portions of that, and then you ended up in Manchester and Ontario with them, Kevin Gravel and Johnny Brodzinski. Was it a little bit easier, that transition to the AHL, knowing that you had two guys that were familiar faces when you made that transition? And I also want to add on top of that, didn't you get to play with Paul Bissonnette too and win a Calder?
Yeah, I mean, that whole year in Manchester was great. I think we had a really, really like unreal team. LA was, didn't call many guys up that year, and they didn't need to. They had a great team too. And so our team was kind of like stuck together all year, which helped. And we had some great players. A lot of NHL guys came from that team. But Gravs and I were roommates in Manch. So that was like super helpful. We knew each other. We were roommates at St. Cloud. So basically for, 5 years we were roommates. That was good. I didn't play with Johnny until we were in Ontario because he was still in school. But it was great playing with Gravs. I mean, we both, like what people don't know about Gravs is he actually signed I think he was on an American League deal right away with LA. And the guy like played so well, fought his way up. He was in and out of the lineup, which great player, probably should have never happened, but they were still rotating guys. And, for him to put together the career that he has been super impressive. That year was good. Like I said, we had a great team, new coach, Mike Stothers, awesome. I think we all made each other better. We were lucky enough to win a Calder that year, which is super special for everybody. That, winning championships is like incredibly hard. That was the first time that the closest that I've come to doing it and that we actually did it. And then playing with Biz, man, that guy's a special dude. It keeps the locker room light. Him and Stutzy had a really good rapport with each other. He was an older guy, kind of already played in the NHL. He was a good mentor in some ways for some of the young guys. And he was honestly one of the best teammates I've ever seen on the ice. Would fight anybody. Like he fought super tough guys. My first year, we had a lot of tough guys in that division, and Biz was, basically, I've heard him tell so many guys, it's like, hey, we can keep talking. It's like, hey, if you do that again, we're going to fight. And that's basically it. Like Biz didn't do a lot of, he talked all the time, but if it came down to it, there wasn't much talking about if they were going to fight or not. It was like, okay, if it happens again, we're going to fight. And that was basically it. And, he allowed guys to play a little bit taller when they were out there with him. And I think he was a huge part of our team to win that championship. So.
Nick, I want to follow up too, because you mentioned Daryl Sutter, and Daryl Sutter is famous for his Sutter-isms, or maybe some of the things that he would say. I'm just kind of curious if you had any maybe famous quotes or maybe some between period speeches that he gave that maybe I guess were off the rails or maybe just kind of different. I guess, is there any kind of famous quotes you've had from either Daryl Sutter or other coaches you've had?
I'm not going to give too much away. Daryl, I think we still have a pretty good relationship if I bumped into him, but, hold on a second, guys. Hey, Paige. Sorry, I left the water running on the plants outside. Got to shut them off. So, one thing I'll always remember is we were playing New Jersey. Puck went behind the net. There was like a little bit of a scrum. Probably should have played the guy a lot harder. And anyways, the puck got cycled up to the D on kind of like a nothing play. The guy cut to the net. Both me and the D-man didn't box anybody out, and they shot it. It kind of just went in, like happens all the time, but definitely didn't do our jobs. Wasn't thinking anything of it at the time. Stuff happens, and get in the locker room, we get pulled in. Me and the D-man get pulled in, and I just remember like it was just like, oh, basically it was just like, oh, you guys playing like a bunch of superstars. I don't have to box anybody out, or don't have to play hard. And like, it was just like, it was just like classic Daryl, but he was right. And it just is so simple. I don't know, I actually enjoyed playing under him. He was tough to play under as a rookie, but I think he definitely was a guy that if you did the right things and you worked hard, then he rewarded players. I think if you want to look him up, if people want to know about him, just YouTube him. So.
And then just a quick follow-up here, Nick. Just sorry, Noah. But Laviolette, you mentioned earlier that, I guess with his style, with their two current linemen, is there anything that Laviolette just stylistically allows you to do that has made your line so successful this last year?
Yeah, I mean, I just think we get a lot of opportunity, and a lot of that starts in the defensive zone, but that's just ice time, right? Like at the NHL level, you just want to find a way to get minutes and add minutes to what you already get. So, like, for an example, fans probably don't understand this usually, but you take a fourth line player and they might be lucky to get 8 to 10 minutes of 5-on-5 time a game, right? And that's if there's no penalties, no power plays, like the game's pretty fluid. But then you start adding in all these, shorthanded opportunities or power play opportunities. And it's like, okay, well, you might be sitting for a while. But I've played on teams where, I've played 6 to 10 minutes a game, and that's hard, right? But you got to figure out a way to do it. You got to stay with it. But I think what Lavi gives us is that last year we just, we started a lot in the defensive zone, regardless if our line was up or not. If there was a D zone face-off, I usually was the guy that would take it, which was great because, hey, we did start in the D zone, which was challenging because if you did lose the draw, you're usually playing against some pretty good forwards, and then you might be spending your entire shift in your D zone, which sucks. But, a lot of the time we focused on winning that face off, getting the possession, and then that just gave us free ice time. Like, yeah, it sucked that we had to start in the D zone, but, and so we found extra minutes there. And then, between me, Hath, and Hags, we all penalty kill. So you add 2 or 3 minutes of penalty kill a game, and now you're boosting your minutes up to 11 to 14. So, Lavi gave us a lot of opportunity in the defensive zone. And we played against a lot of other teams' top lines, which was awesome. I mean, I think that was great. I think it taught us a lot. I had never done that before in my career. And a lot of those players out there, I mean, we have like super elite players on our team. So I got to play against them in practice, but to match up a full game against a Patrice Bergeron or like even a Sidney Crosby, I mean, that's it makes you feel good that your coach trusts you to do that. So.
Yeah, it must be also fun to line up on a draw against Connor McDavid. He's pretty slow, I hear. So, one of my favorite Daryl Sutter quotes, I think it must have been the series when Martinez scored that game winner in overtime against Chicago in Game 7, and I think they lost Game 6. And they come to the press conference and they said, Daryl, what'd you tell the guys after the loss? And he said, plane leaves at 8. I mean, like that was his answer. Just a classic Daryl Sutter quote. So, Nick, I got 3 questions for you. I had 2 and thought of a third one, so I'll try to make them quick for you. My first one, I want to go all the way back to your roots, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, I should say, native. And then you kind of made your way through, Culver Military Prep, who the player recently to follow in your footsteps was actually Nolan Walker, who's a current senior on the Huskies men's hockey team. Then you went to the NAHL, the USHL, and then ended up as a Husky. What was that journey like being a kid from Huntsville, being able to claw your way into, at that time, Division I hockey? And then have you kept up at all on the situation with their program and their ability to kind of, find a schedule and a conference for them to play in after this upcoming season?
Yeah. I mean, I think just starting with your first question is honestly, looking back on it, I think the fact that I was so naive to how hard it would be to get to the NHL was probably what allowed me to actually eventually get there. As a player growing up anywhere, Minnesota, whatever, Minnesota, you're definitely more in tune with it a little bit because you're around a lot of other people that have been there, and, you have friends that have done it. You watch NHL games all the time. I mean, Minnesota and hockey are just so intertwined, but honestly, I mean, growing up, I played because I enjoyed it. I had 2 older brothers that got me into it. I played a lot of mini sticks. I mean, when you look at it, like you end up practicing like an enormous amount because it's so much fun that you're outside all the time that you're just enjoying it, right? Like if you were to ask an NHL player at like 31 to go out there and be like, hey man, let's go play outside and play street hockey for 3 hours, you'd be like, this is insane. And, you do it as a kid and it's like, oh, this is great. Like I can stay out here forever. So, I think you do that. And then I played in the Huntsville Amateur Hockey Association, which was their youth program, which was great. We traveled around, we played teams like Nashville, Atlanta, Memphis, some bits in Florida, Birmingham. That was fine. That was awesome. And then And then they started that TPH Thunder, which is like a AAA program out of the Southeast. And I joined that and played, and you're having fun and, you're enjoying yourself, and you try and be one of the best players on the ice, but you're not thinking about it like day in, day out, right? You're just playing hockey. So I don't think it really hit me until I really got to St. Cloud after my sophomore year is when I really, in between that I played at Culver, which again, I went there, I was 5'3", 110 pounds. And I went there and just went there to play hockey. I didn't even if I had looked back on it, I'd be like, holy shit, man, you're so far behind some of the kids in your age group that are playing prep. And I played on JV for a year, played on varsity B for a year. And not until my senior year did I make the prep team, playing with guys that had been on the prep team for like 4 years already. And I didn't even understand that. It was just like, oh, this is just the normal, way to go. So I think if someone had told me that from the beginning, it would have been, painful to understand that I felt that I was so far behind. But, I think one of the biggest things I tell young players is like, hey, it doesn't matter where you're from, where you live. If you're good enough, someone's going to find you, because people are paid to do that. And people like to hang their hat on finding the next, whatever. And if you continue to play and you enjoy it, and like I said, if you're a good player, someone's going to find you. Like, you don't even know when people are watching. I mean, my whole recruitment story is like hilarious about Eric Rude losing. I forgot even how their season ended, but they lost. He was pissed. So he was like, I'm out of here. I'm leaving the next day. I'm out. So he left, flew up to Washington State, or maybe Seattle, or like whatever it was, to watch the BC League, was like bored, somehow ventured into Wenatchee to watch a game, because he was like, oh, like whatever. Like, I'm just so sick of being in Minnesota right now because we lost and we should still be playing. And it was in playoffs. And then like he sees me, I don't know he's there, right? Like at all. And he sees me and he's like, oh, okay, this is a good player, right? And it helped that I had one of my better games. It could have been a shit game for me, but it helped that I had a better game. And all of a sudden, Reuter calls Bob, you gotta get out here and watch this Nic Dowd kid. And Bob's like, no, I'm not coming out there. There's no way. Like, I'm not going all the way out to Wenatchee. Our season's over. I want to be with my family. He's like, you got to come out here. So then all of a sudden, like Gasparini from LA, Reuter knows him. So he calls, you got to come watch this kid. So Gaspo's like, Gaspo tells me the story, he's like, so I'm sitting there. I just got back from like a 10 or 15 or something day road trip. I'm there with my wife, and he's like, I wake up Sunday morning, I get this phone call, and he turns to me, sorry, honey, I got to go. So he gets on another flight, flies up to Washington, watches me. I didn't even know Gaspo was there. And then finally, they're like, Bob, you got to come out. So Bob's like, Bob, he's like, oh, okay. He's like, fine, I'll come out there. So he goes out there, watches me. And then I had a meeting with him that night, and, not a meeting, but I talked to him, whatever, how they're allowed to talk to you after the game and say hi. And 2 weeks later I was committed. So, they're going to find you, like, enjoy playing, keep playing. And like I said, if you're good enough, they're going to find you. But yeah. So.
Yeah, not bad for a 2009 7th rounder. As you meander your way through your house there.
I got to plug in here. I can't lose you fellas. There we go.
Yeah. My second to last question for you has to do with the current situation in which you find yourself in. You are entering your contract year. What is that like, I guess, from, a player standpoint, entering a contract year, knowing you had a good season last year, but, you got to be on every night in order to kind of earn that next bid and kick at the can, if you will.
Yeah. I think it's obviously something to acknowledge, but I don't put a lot of thought into it. I think, I think that's probably, for me, that's the best way to do it, and continue just to go out. And I want to get better this year. So I could care less that it's my contract year. I want to have a better year than I did last year, and get better as, and then move forward. So I think that's how I'm approaching it. And I don't put a lot of thought into it. So,
yeah. Well, we wish you the best of luck, obviously, in that. And once again, we thank you for joining us. My last question revolves around St. Cloud hockey. You mentioned Bob Motzko. I believe you got a chance to be at the alumni golf tournament last week as well. Speaking of Bob Motzko, a nice little tribute to Mac there as well. What does that golf tournament mean to you? And, was it nice to get back, with the boys and kind of hang out for a little bit and kind of get your mind away from hockey?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, that was my first one that I've attended. I hate to say that, but I think we've been busy, before and all the other ones. And it was awesome. I mean, you get back and you get to see a lot of guys that, you're relatively close with, but you necessarily haven't seen. And especially with this past year and a half with COVID, I mean, that's a different story, but yeah, it was good. I think you pack all the guys. It's just like, it's something to be said that when you pack a bunch of guys that have been through the same experience as you into like the same bar, it's just like a lot of fun, right? You kind of fall right back into where you left off, and it's super easy to have a lot of fun. So the golf was not so good. Our team sucked, but Jens carried our team. But yeah, I mean that's beside the point. I think I was playing till I could get to the bar to see the fellas. But yeah, it was good. I hope we continue to do that every year. It was a lot of fun. So.
Nic Dowd, again, we wish you the best of luck, first of all, in your definitely the next season. Hopefully we can keep, the full 82-game schedule, that this COVID thing just does not keep kind of interfering. I know it's been crazy, and like we're all just kind of over it, but it's been crazy. But again, we do thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. Again, good luck. And yeah, go Huskies. How about that? Can you hit us with a go Huskies woo?
We got to go Huskies. Woo!
There we go. Nic, thanks again on here as the episode number 72 here for the Healthy Scratch interview.
And once again, always a blast to sit down with any St. Cloud State alumni. But you know what? When they play in the show, Nic, it makes it a little bit sweeter. I got to be honest with you. I mean, any kind of parting thoughts that you had about this episode here with Mr. Dowd?
I loved the initial story about, him getting the call, that his wife was, having their first child. And again, I think he hits it right in the head. There's certain things that, just you have in your head the timing, but, it's so early, and then just asking, what do I do? And it took, a couple of different personnel within the organization just be like, no, you got to go. So I thought that was pretty fun, but, honestly, just an incredibly, well articulate interview with Nic Dowd. And again, wishing the best of luck with Washington the upcoming season. Again, just fantastic that we were able to get a chance to sit down and talk with him.
Yeah, I was going to kind of reiterate the same thing. I think it means a lot. I got to give a shout out right now to Bill Prout from Center SU for making that connection for us at the alumni golf tournament and kind of hooking us up with Nic, getting him on the show. And of course, Nic, obviously he didn't have to come hang out on our Rinky Dink podcast. He's got a friend in Paul Bissonnette that apparently has a little bit more successful one related to hockey podcasts, if you will, just a little bit, just a tiny bit. So we appreciate Nic, and wish him obviously the best of luck this year with the Capitals. With that being said, Nic, that will do it for episode number 72 of the Healthy Scratch interview segment. As always, check us out on Sundays. Episode number 73 is coming your way. If I can figure out how, +1 works in the math world there. And we're going to talk, I think, probably some more NHL hockey. That's kind of been the big news that's going on in the world of hockey. Nic, anything else to add, or should we say sayonara to the folks here?
So yeah, I got a Spanish final to take.
Well, we'll check in on Sunday and see how that goes for you. Poor K, as they say. That will do it. And we'll see you next week in the den.
Timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL!
Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.